Hey there, in this video, you're gonna learn how to color match a subject with the background, along with a couple of extra tips to just make the composite a little bit more crisp. So this video comes with a downloadable project file and a couple of assignments. So go download that so you can follow along and then put your skills to the test. Now, let's jump into Photoshop. All right, now that we're in Photoshop, you should have 4 images. We have our 2 assignment images. We have a forest, which is what we're gonna use in this tutorial. And we have a cutout model. I've already pre-cut that out, so we're good to go. We're gonna use these 2 images. So let's bring our model over. Let's drop it in. He's a bit big, so let's resize him. Control T, and we'll bring him down a little bit. I think about there, looks pretty good. Enter. I said we're gonna use curves, so let's go grab a curves adjustment layer. We'll click on that. Let's clip it to our subject so we affect only our subject. These 3 little eyedroppers is what's gonna help us color correct or color match our subject. So we have our shadows, we have our midtones, and we have our highlights. So if we double click on this, we can click in the background, the darkest spot for the shadows, maybe over here. Now it went white. The reason why it's got white and it doesn't choose any other color is, let's just get out of there, is that our layer mask is selected and not the curves icon. So let's select the curves icon, and now if we double click, we can now choose the darkest color in the image. Press OK, and we're gonna save this as the target color. So click yes. We're gonna go to our highlights, double click, and we're gonna choose the brightest area in this image. So I think up there is pretty close. I think we might just bring it up a little bit brighter. Yeah, that looks good. Press OK, click yes, hit our midtones. So we've got darks, which is black. We've got our highlights, which is white. Now what would be the grays? Grays is midtone. So if our image was black and white, what would be grayest? Maybe something like that position there. Click OK, click yes. Now, nothing's happened, but that's okay. Now we need to match our darks, midtones, and highlights on our subject with the colors that we just chose in the background. If we select our eyedropper, just one click, we click on the darkest part of our subject, which I think would be maybe here. We'll click our highlights. So for me, the highlights on him would be this shiny spot on his nose, or maybe just on his collarbone. Maybe his nose, we'll go there. Maybe on his collarbone. You can always click a couple of spots. I think there we go, that looks pretty good. And now our midtones, what would be gray if this image was black and white? Well, he's wearing a gray shirt, so let's click on the gray. And look at that. Amazing. The before and the after. Beautiful. Now let's look at how we can really composite this together a little bit nicer. I told you we're gonna have a couple of extra tips and tricks. So let's add some depth of field. So a blur to the background. Let's go ahead and turn our background into a smart object. So we'll unlock that, right click, convert to smart object. Let's go up to filter. We'll go to blur, Gaussian blur. And I think maybe 2.5 is pretty good. We'll click OK. Now this comes up with our layer mask for our smart filters, not an actual layer mask for our image. If we had a layer mask on our image and we erased, that would erase our image. But our smart filters mask just erases the smart filters that we've applied to this image. So for that, it's the Gaussian blur. Now I wanted to add depth of field, which means the further away from our subject, the blurrier it gets. If we go ahead and make sure our smart filter mask is selected, we can then grab our eraser tool and maybe not 100% opacity for our eraser. Maybe we'll go something like 60%. I think that's pretty good. So pretty close. is going to be not very blurred at all. So I'll just click and erase that part of the smart filter, and maybe just a little bit on this tree. I might even lower the opacity more on this one, maybe 36%. I'll erase a little bit on that tree, and I'll erase a little bit on the ground that's pretty close to him. So if we look, we go smart filter off, smart filter on. Now it's looking pretty good, but our subject is very crisp and clean compared to the background. So the edges of our subject should also have some sort of depth of field, should have some sort of blur. So let's go ahead and convert our subject to a smart object. Right click, convert to smart object. We'll go to filter, blur gallery this time, and we'll go to field blur. So now we can choose all sorts of parts that we want to blur and how much we want to blur them. I want his face to be sharp, so we'll bring this up and we can drag this all the way down to what we want, or we can come up to this right side and I can just lower this down to 0. I can then click and add a blur over here. Now that's a little bit high, so I might bring that down, maybe a little bit more. I think that's okay at the moment. We'll do one over here, and we'll bring this one down. Maybe there. We'll do one on his chest, and that might be like maybe 1 or 2. And maybe 1 here. We'll bring this down to maybe 2. A bit closer. 1 over here, we'll bring that down to 2. And I might even do one just on his hair, down to 2. Maybe just at the back here. Click OK. If I turn it off, it's very sharp. Turn it on, we've got a little bit of blur happening to help him composite. Now, we're not done. We've got a couple more things to do and then we'll be finished. So we're gonna add a color gradient over the whole image, a global color. Make sure our top layer is selected so that when we create our next layer, our next adjustment layer, it's going to affect the whole image. So come down to this little icon here, we'll click, we'll come up to color lookup, and we'll come up with this box here. Now, we have a bunch of presets right here. So if we click on that, we can come down and we can click and go through all different looks and feels that we want. So for this one, I might go, we've got like a warmish color. I don't like that. So maybe we'll go a crisp, warm color, and that is very strong. So let's lower the opacity a little bit. And it's made my blacks very black. So I might remove a little bit of that. So if we double click, this top bar here affects the actual layer itself. And then this bottom panel affects what's behind that layer. So here I want to affect the blacks. So if I drag this up, if you can see in this little bottom corner, things start to change. So I'm only going to bring it up maybe just a little bit. And then I want to split this, which makes it a softer transition. So I hold Alt, I click, and now I can drag it to where I want, maybe there. And I'll even lower the opacity just a little bit more. Beautiful. Now let's turn that off. Let's click, we'll add one more underneath. So we'll go to color lookup. We can have a look through some of these strips. We'll go to this late sunset one, and then what we'll do is we'll change the blend mode to soft light right here, and it's very, very dark, it's too much. So let's bring the opacity of that right down, maybe 10-15%. Turn our other one back on, and look at that. So just for an example, I will grab this layer and this layer. I'll create a copy I will get rid of any smart filters on these two. I'll group that. I'll group these together. So this is original and this is our edited version. So if I just click on here, we got before and after. Before and after. We can even go ahead and one more step and crop this to a nicer composition. We talked about this in the crop tutorial. So we'll click our crop tool. We'll make sure deleted crop pixels is off. And maybe we'll make like a portrait. Click that and look at that. I would also use other elements to help create depth of field and blending a bit more. If we have a look at some examples here. Here I turn myself into a pumpkin head and I've used other elements here in the foreground to create depth of field with the stuff at the background. I've used highlights as well, along with some shadows. Other images that I've used to help blend. So everything is color corrected, blended. This is the model that we've actually just used in this tutorial. I've even put my logo on his shirt like we did in the logo tutorial. And I swapped his head out for a tiger. So for your assignment, I want you to use the model. I want you to try to blend the model using those techniques into this image and this image. So you have two assignments. They've got two different types of color in the background. So your job is to blend it in, go through those filters, see which filter works the best, and using your curves, using those color pickers, and that's it. Well, there you go, guys. There is how you color match your subject to a background using the curves adjustment layer, along with those couple of little extra tips with the color lookup and depth of field. Go ahead, do those two assignments. Each assignment is going to use different types of LUTs and overlays in that color lookup range. So have a little play, see what you come up with. When you finish it, post it on Instagram and tag me ruthless_graphics_productions. I'd love to see it. If you want any of my advice or critiquing, drop that in your comment as well. A quick recap on what we just learned. We learned how to color match our subject using the curves. We learned how to do a global color overlay to help merge those images together to make it a little bit more seamless. We learned how to create depth of field using the blur gallery plus a Gaussian blur. And we learned how to edit the filter using that layer mask for the filters only. So go have fun with that, and I will see you in the next video.